What is a namespace? What is the difference between Java and other programs when we talk about a package? What is a package? And I hear the thing about code scope. What is the meaning of that? Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Today we are gonna talk about these three concepts: namespace, package, and code scope. Well, we will start with code scope. To put it simple, it means that you will have a piece of code, and that piece of code is in a block of your program, and this block is dedicated to itself. So if you define anything here, like a variable, like any parameters here, this parameter or variable or any other object, so variables, parameters, whatever you name them, or any other object is alive only as long as your program is running this block. So these live only in the time that the program is running this block. So when the program goes out, we have something that is called garbage collector. Now, you are not handling this. This is handled by the language itself, by the operating system itself, or by the main application that you are using. For example, if you are using Unity 3D, Unity 3D has its own garbage collector. If you are using Unreal Engine, it has its own garbage collector. Java has its own, C# has its own. Garbage collector is a piece of software that will come and look for these orphaned objects that are not alive anymore, and it will delete them from memory. When the program finishes the job of this block and goes outside of this block, these will not remain in memory and will be deleted by garbage collector. This is called the scope of your code. Now, different pieces of code has different scopes. For example, don't worry if you don't understand the word. We will come back to this later in different languages, but you can loop through a piece of code time and time again. For example, you have a piece of code and you say that, hey, please loop through this piece of code for me at least 10 times, okay? So this will happen for 10 times. And anything that is sitting inside this loop is limited to the scope of the loop. So when the program finishes these 10 times and goes out of the loop, any object that you defined inside this loop will be deleted and are not alive anymore. So these objects are living in the scope of the loop. This is how we talk in the language, in the programming. Object X is in the scope of this loop. Okay, now going back to these two words. Namespace. Namespace is a very big scope of the code that can have multiple objects living inside itself, okay? But these are not being instantiated. These are not being generated unless you are calling and instantiating them somewhere in your code, okay? So these objects are just defined in the scope of a namespace, but not instantiated, not created a copy, and they are not functional. You just define that, hey, for example, I have an object called person, okay? Now this person has phone number, name, family name, address, but this is just the definition. It's here. And this is in a namespace blah on top, and this is the namespace blah. So we are just defining an object called person in the scope of this namespace, okay? And whenever we want to make a copy and use this person, we have to address this namespace somewhere in our code, because you may have two different persons, or let's say human. It's a better example, okay? You may have a namespace called address book. You may have a namespace called users and another namespace called game characters. Now, in all three of them, you may have a new definition for human. So you have a human definition dedicated for address book, a human definition for the users of the game, for example, if it's an online game, and a human definition inside the game, okay, as a game character. Now, somewhere in the code, you will have something like this. Human A equals to a new human. What you are doing here, don't worry about this syntax, just understand what is going on here. This and this are defining the type of A. Now, the system is confused here. Which one of these three humans are you addressing, here and here? How should I know if it's the human you want from address book, or it's a user, or is it a game character? This is where namespace comes in. For example, we are saying using in C#, okay, using game character. Now here we are defining that, hey, if you saw a human word, we want the human inside the game character, and ignore these two. This is the usage of namespace. So you can have different objects with the same name sitting inside different scopes as namespaces, and when we are creating a new instance of them, we can say, hey, we want to use this one, okay? That's the namespace for you. However, when we come to the word package, now package is a little bit confusing. The reason is that Java is different from things like C# or Python or others. Java is an exception here. In Java, a package is the equivalent of a namespace within the code, okay? So when we are writing the code in Java, you will see that on the top of any object class, we will have package blah. And that means that this is the namespace of this object that you're defining, okay? In C#, for example, package means something else. Package means that some programmer somewhere, maybe you, maybe other people, wrote some code, okay? It can be 10 lines, it can be millions of lines, and then they packaged these lines of code inside something that you can download and reuse. For example, as a plugin. Now, plugin here means a piece of code that you can reference in your project and use the API inside this plugin. Or as a NuGet package. If you ever hear the word NuGet, NuGet is packages dedicated for C# and programs like C#, okay? Or if you ever hear the Python packages, now these three are this type of the package. They are not namespaces. They are bundled objects and code that you can reference in your project as an API and use that in your program. And this is the difference between Java and other languages when it comes to the word package. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.